Good afternoon. My name is Joseph Houston, and as the director of the Lewiston Public Library, I would like to welcome you all to the Great Falls Forum. The Forum is a monthly speaker series featuring leaders in the areas of business, public policy, academia, and the arts, and is a partnership of Bates College, the Sun Journal, and Lewiston Public Library. This year marks the 26th season of Great Falls Forum. We thank you for your continued support and ensuring the program's success. Today's program is also streaming live via Zoom and Facebook, and a recording will be available on the library's YouTube page. Please visit lplonline.org for more information. Please mark your calendars for our next Great Falls Forum on March 21st with Pat Weber, Director of the Muskie Archives and Special Collections Library at Bates College. At the conclusion of today's program, there will be an opportunity for audience questions. Those in the room are welcome to raise your hands, and those joining us virtually can enter their questions using the Q&A feature on Zoom or comment on Facebook, and we'll read these to our speaker. And now I have the pleasure of introducing today's featured speaker, Dr. Kanae Tokunaga. Dr. Kanae Tokunaga is a senior scientist in coastal and marine economics at the Gulf of Maine Research Institute. She applies economic modeling, data science, and interview and survey approaches to study how humans interact with coastal and marine natural resources. Her recent work focuses on understanding climate change impacts and climate-induced adaptation and transformation in fisheries and aquaculture systems and socioeconomic impacts of offshore wind energy development on coastal communities. Her disciplinary background is economics, but most of her current work is inter- or transdisciplinary, collaborating with natural and social scientists, fishery and aquaculture stakeholders, and coastal communities. Prior to joining GMRI in 2019, she received a PhD in economics and ocean policy certificate from the University of Hawaii and worked as a researcher at the University of Tokyo in Japan. Please join me in welcoming Kanae to Lewiston.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for having me today. And I'm very excited to talk to you today about what's going on in the Gulf of Maine. I'm thinking about climate change and blue acceleration. And some of you might think, oh, what is blue acceleration? I'm going to get into that. But before I get started, I wanted to tell you a little bit about the Gulf of Maine Research Institute. So we're a nonprofit research institution located in Portland, Maine on Commercial Street. So the research is in our name. So we do academic and scientific research, but we are unique in a way that we also have a strong community engagement program as well as K-12 education program. And our community team engages with the coastal stakeholders, fisheries, aquaculture, coastal communities, and in the region. So when I say in the region, in the Gulf of Maine region, our education program offers science programming to K-12 students and provide teacher trainings to the region science teachers. And we are lucky at Gulf of Maine Research Institute. We welcome about 70 to 80% of third graders from all over Maine, and they come and they take and learn about what's going on in the Gulf of Maine. So you might know someone who's already been through that program, and we're really fortunate to be able to offer that to our next generation. So our mission is we're really big on collaborative solutions to global ocean challenges, and a lot of what we're experiencing in the Gulf of Maine is shared with many parts of the world as well. And thinking about my lab, so I lead a coastal and marine economics lab at the Gulf of Maine Research Institute. My research area is really to understand how humans interact with ocean and the coastal resources. And of course, we are hugely impacted by climate change. So that has become major topic area that our lab study. GMRI, broadly speaking, we have 4 challenges that we tackle. So seafood sustainability, healthy ocean ecosystems, climate change, and thriving blue economy. These are all what we work on together, not just from the scientific and academic approaches, but also working with the stakeholders and also with the schools throughout the Northeast. So today I'm going to talk about blue acceleration, but I also wanted to touch on some of the academic definition of blue economy. And you might have heard the word blue economy recently because it's been getting used more and more, just like a buzzword. But what does it really mean? In scientific literature, blue economy is defined as a system that improves human well-being and social equity while achieving environmentally sustainable economic growth. Oftentimes, when you hear the words blue economy on the news, highlight might have been thinking about new technology coming into the ocean space, so blue tech industries, or the new uses of the ocean. But what's important here really is that this concept really highlights the importance of human well-being and social equity. So just keep those two keep that in mind. And blue, yeah. Oh, is this better? Okay. Thank you. So blue acceleration. So this is the trend that we see in the world. So we're living in the era of blue acceleration. It is really a new phase in humanity's relationship with the ocean. And we're experiencing a phenomenal rate of change over the last 30 years with a sharp acceleration of ocean uses. So I'm presenting here 3 examples. So marine shipping. Since 2000, the year 2000, marine shipping has increased by 254%. Marine aquaculture since 2000, the year 2000 has increased 160%. And look at offshore wind farms. We didn't really have anything like that back in 2000, but now globally it's with the climate change and then the needs to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, we are seeing a huge accelerated rate of wind energy development happening globally. And Maine is not really not an exception from this global blue acceleration trend. Marine shipping in Maine, so shipping cargo capacity in Maine increased by 5 times over the past decade. And in 2022, vessel cargo capacity reached over 40,000 TEU. TEU is a 20-foot equivalent unit. That's the unit used to measure the capacity of marine shipping and transportation vessel cargo. But we are really experiencing the expansion of the marine shipping in Maine and aquaculture in Maine. As you might be aware, American oyster is one of the growing industry. The aquaculture of oysters is a growing industry. 2008 is not really a long time ago. It's only, 26, 24, 16 years ago. Thank you. Back then, as you can see on this map that I got from Maine Department of Marine Resources, back then, what you see is the dot here in Damariscotta, which was already really well established back then, but the production was valued at $2.24 million, inflation adjusted into 2022 value. This is back in 2008. Now, fast forward 16 years, both 14 years. So in 2022, that's the latest information that we have on the aquaculture production in Maine. It has really grown. And as you can see, now we are seeing aquaculture production. I don't know if you can't see the the cursor, but you're seeing like a larger dots appearing in other regions throughout Maine. And as the production value has increased to $8.39 million. So it's really a rapid and a big expansion that we're seeing in oyster aquaculture in Maine. And of course, there are other species that are harvested by aquaculture. And now offshore wind energy. So you might have also heard a lot about offshore wind energy development happening in the Gulf of Maine recently. And that is because our region in the Northeast, we have huge wind energy production capacity in the ocean space. And compared to the land-based wind energy production, ocean has more sustained wind. That is why we're kind of in the, or it's in kind of like our region is kind of like a hot spot or the of the offshore wind development, and with a large potential for greenhouse gas emission reduction. And of course, blue acceleration, we are experiencing all these changes in the ocean space as we experience climate change. And the Gulf of Maine is, compared to the global average, warming 3 times faster. So this is really, it's a huge challenge. We're experiencing rapid warming of the waters that has impacts on ecosystem. At the same time, from the human side, there are a lot of the use of the ocean resources that is really accelerating. If you're curious about why this is happening, I included the QR code here, but if you type in Gulf of Maine explain on the Google, you should be able to go to GMRI's website to learn more about why this is happening in the Gulf of Maine. So blue acceleration in the era of climate change. So we've been talking about the importance of sustainability and sustainable economic growth for over decades now. Now, in the ocean space, with the concept such as blue economy emerging, we're really realizing not only the importance of not only sustainability, but thinking about human well-being and the social equitable access to the benefits that our oceans offer. And climate resilience, this is something that we also need to tackle. And by climate resilience, academic literature has different definition of what this means, but today's talk, what I mean by climate resilience is our society and individual humans' ability to cope, adapt, and transform under climate change. So today I'm going to share some stories from 3 marine ocean economy sectors. I'm going to talk about commercial fisheries because it's not a new, it's a historically and culturally important sector in this region. And I think just talking about this would probably give you some is a good background on the unprecedented experience that we're having right now in blue economy sector growth, blue economy and blue acceleration we are seeing in the Gulf of Maine. And aquaculture, I'm going to also talk about aquaculture and offshore wind. But let's dive into the commercial fisheries in the Gulf of Maine. So Maine's historically and socioculturally important sector is, of course, the commercial fisheries. And right now, in the Gulf of Maine or in this region in the Northeast US, lobster and scallops are the important species that are providing a lot of economic value to the economy in this region. So lobster in Maine is valued at 392 millions in 2022, and scallops, this is not in Maine, but in Massachusetts, scallops is a huge important species and providing 391 million value. This is in 2022. But compared to agricultural products, these are still somewhat small in terms of the economic dollar value. But again, historically and socioculturally, very, very important. Lobster fishery in Maine, the science says that there's a possibility of climate change really impacting the resources. And one study published in 2018 is predicting or projecting that there will be 50% decrease in resource abundance by 2050. So that's a huge impact coming from the natural environment on this fishery. But when you start thinking about, so what does the climate resilience of this fishery looks like? What becomes very important is the understanding of the current or the baseline economic performance of this fishery. And with that, the importance of understanding the diversity that exists in this Maine's lobster fleet. When you hear about Maine lobstermen, you might have a certain idea of what it looks like. But when you go to the water and look at their boat and how they operate, they're all different. It's a quite diverse fishery. And so using statistical methods, myself and my colleague Alexa Dayton identified 5 different business styles that exist in this fishery. And this has also, and in conjunction with that, natural scientists are really looking at the climate change impacts on this fishery. And the Gulf of Maine is oceanographically quite complex. And I'm an economist, so I cannot go really into details of how that's the case. But the research is showing that the differences, the regional differences in the impact, the oceanographic condition, looking at the Eastern Gulf of Maine and Western Gulf of Maine. So even in so just taking this into consideration, and then when you look at how different business models that exist in the lobster fishery performed, we only have a good data from 2010, so we're using 2010 as a baseline, but we could already see in 2010, which is really at the beginning of the Gulf of Maine warming, for certain business models or business types, there are some differences, regional differences. So if you're in the Western Gulf of Maine and Eastern Gulf of Maine, and then comparing the two operations that has same two vessels who are characterized to have the same business model, their economic performance was quite different based on whether you are in the Eastern Gulf of Maine or Western Gulf of Maine. And this is the type of information that can really help with the resilience planning in the future for the lobster fishery. But unfortunately, we don't have good data on operational and economic information about this fishery. And 2010 is kind of GMRI ran the survey with the Maine Lobstermen's Association. So we had the data back in 2010, but we don't have this information. And I really want to highlight the importance of routine longitudinal collection of this type of information to help support the climate resilience in this fishery. A quick time check. So there are various ways that the lobster fishery can adapt. And of course, there are some operational changes. But as I said, we don't quite understand how they might change their fishing operations in the future. So will they invest in different types of different types of vessel? Will they change? Would they start bringing more crew members on board? These are type of informations that we don't have good data on because the fishery is going through the climate change for the first time, obviously. So it again highlighting the need for longitudinal economic survey to start collecting that kind of information so that we can have a better understanding of how they might fare under climate change and what kind of support they might need if they decide to stay in the fishery. What about groundfish fishery? It's a much, much smaller fishery in terms of the economic value, but still culturally very important. And when you go out to the restaurant in Maine or in New England and order species such as haddock, you might actually be eating haddock from Eastern Atlantic. And then that can be a challenge. The Eastern Atlantic or in Alaska, they have much, much larger whitefish fisheries. So when I say whitefish, those are species like cod and haddock than the Gulf of Maine. So we're competing against those large players, can be a huge challenge for this region. But what I can say is that the fishery management in the United States is really quite strict. And the groundfish fishery here is currently managed by what is called quota-based management. So the manager set what you're allowed, what the fishermen can catch, the quotas on the harvest, so the maximum amount that the fishermen can catch per year based on the science to maintain, to ensure the sustainability of resources. But what is also interesting, you might have not known, is that we leave a lot of fish unharvested in the water. So many species, such as pollock and redfish, they are underharvested. So the fisheries don't meet that quota. So we're leaving a lot more than the sustainable level of resources unharvested in the water. And that is because it's a multi-species fishery. So when I say multi-species fishery, what I mean by that is a vessel go out to catch, say, try to target pollock, but there is always a chance that you might also catch other species. So there are ways to be selective, but that can be costly or might need gear modification. So that's one of the reasons why a lot of the species are left unharvested. And the quota-based management, the challenge really for the multi-species fishery is that the harvest quotas are set for each stock. And the fishermen are required to have that quota to enable them to land the certain species. So what I mean by that is that you need to have the quota if you want to land this particular species, and the quota is traded kind of in like a marketplace. So there is a supply and demand of quota. Quota amount is set by the managers, but so the supply is kind of fixed. And even if you want to catch more pollock, but if there's a chance that you also are catching cod as you catch pollock, then you need to obtain quota for cod. And the quota price of cod can be really, really expensive. That might prohibit harvesters to not target pollock. So that's the challenge that happens in the quota-based fisheries management. And the cost of leasing quota has become one of the largest cost item on the fishing operation. So a lot of challenges, really high cost of entry into these sectors, the lobster and groundfish fisheries. And implication really is that the barriers to entry. So we're seeing grain of fleet, and then also the new entrants, younger generations, or those who are new in the fishery experiencing difficult time accessing the fishery to gain benefit from the resources. We also have shoreside infrastructure. New England issue. The New England is home to processing, many processors who process white fish. And now they are importing the same species from the Eastern Atlantic. So they have some flexibility in terms of where they source. But at the same time, as the species composition change in the Gulf of Maine because of climate change, that also changes the environmental conditions. Their infrastructure, they are in a difficult. They have to adapting that existing infrastructure to climate change can also be a challenge. And lobster infrastructure too. We have lobster processors here, but the processing facility is made to process lobsters, not crabs, for instance. So the switching to new species can be pretty challenging. Now, I've talked about a lot of challenges, but I can really summarize this that climate resilience in fishery sector, it needs to take, it requires multi-dimensional, multi-domain action. So the governance needs to be flexible, so and adaptive, responsive and adaptive governance. Infrastructure on the processor side needs to be flexible and agile. And fishermen then can only be able to start targeting new species or diversify their portfolio. So there is really a chicken egg problem that needs to be solved for this for the fisheries to be resilient. I'm gonna skip over some of the detailed slides, but I talked so much about the challenges and I wanted to offer some opportunities. And then when you know that you can catch more fish, what can you do in order for you to maintain your income? You gotta increase the value of the product that you're catching. There are different ways to achieve that. One might be really focusing on improving the quality of seafood products by icing, chilling, preserving quality. And that can really have a win-win-win. That can create a win-win-win situations for harvesters, dealers, processors, and also for consumers. Because research is also showing that there are segment of consumers who really care about where the fish comes from, how they're harvested. So having that consistent supply of high quality products locally can really meet the needs of those consumers. For the processors too, if they have consistent supply of high quality seafood products from the region, they might be able to reach the market that they didn't have access to before, such as high-end restaurants. Maine seafood carries a brand recognition out of state, so that's a real opportunities. And there's also some technological advances in measuring seafood quality. So places like in Alaska, they are using sensors. So it's a handheld sensor that can detect and take the quantitative measure of the seafood quality. So the processor can really, have the objective measure of the quality of the fish that they're dealing. And then they have the high quality of fish can mean longer shelf life, and then that can really help the business bottom line. So we are working. So myself working with GMRI's community team, Sustainable Seafood team, we are working to test out this type of new technology to see whether this can help the fisheries in this region acquire higher price premium for the products that they're catching and selling. Check-in time. And I want to shift to talking about aquaculture. So I'm going to skip through some slides, but I'd be happy to answer questions about bluefin tuna if you're curious later. Aquaculture in Maine, as I mentioned earlier, is really growing. And it's really exciting. And what we see with this growth is the emergence of new type of businesses. As I mentioned earlier, Maine is carries almost a brand recognition out of state, and out of state consumers really value seafood products from Maine. And oyster is really one good example. And oyster being aquaculture oysters from Maine, the supply is consistent because it's aquaculture compared to the wild harvest products, and the quality is high. So, so when we were seeing the huge growth in oyster aquaculture in Maine, our first thought was, oh, we're gonna max out the demand, max out the market. What are we gonna do? Well, turns out we didn't have to worry because the demand is still higher than what's being supplied. What's also exciting that we're seeing new types of businesses, like I mentioned earlier. The traditional seafood supply chain looks like there's a harvesting or the harvesting from the farm that goes to the dealers and distributors. Then the dealers and distributors sell to specialized dealers or wholesalers. And then they sell to restaurants or retail chains for consumption. But we are seeing new types of businesses. So farms starting to aggregate products from nearby farms to sell to consumers directly. We started to see that kind of new type of business emerge in the sector, which I think is really exciting. But of course, there is challenges. The logistical challenges is one of the example, but how do we move the products? As I was showing earlier in the map, now we have aquaculture operation throughout Maine. We got to think of ways to move those products. Now, many of the farms are really relying on existing infrastructure. Not everyone can afford to have their own truck. And so they rely on the lobster infrastructure, like the trucking lobsters. And then we ask, those trucks to also, or farms ask those trucks to also transport oysters. So there is heavy reliance on existing lobster infrastructure, which might not be perfect because shellfish is has higher quality assurance standard because of the public health concerns. So it really requires cleaner and digitized seafood facilities that can support the growth of the industry. And if you want to have oyster region, multiple oyster regions in the state, that becomes really a challenge. And so we are seeing a huge exciting opportunities in aquaculture sector, and we also need to think about who can benefit from this growth in aquaculture sector. And with our learning scientist at GMRI, Amanda Dickus, myself and a few others are working to develop career opportunities for youth in Maine to engage with this aquaculture sector. And aquaculture really is a STEM career. And in order for this to have the strong pipeline of workforce going into this industry, we really need to think about how we can help younger generations learn about this aquaculture and do a good job in the future. And it also offers a very exciting STEM education opportunities. So Amanda and the team took students to the farms, and then we worked with the Lewiston School, McMahon Elementary, to bring the students from there to aquaculture farms so that they can learn firsthand from the farm owners what it means to run aquaculture operation. In order to run a successful aquaculture business, you need to understand not only what's going on in the water, so understanding water chemistry or oceanographic dynamics, water temperature, what that means for the animal growth, so animal husbandry, but the farmers also need to make a lot of business decisions. So the students had the opportunity to talk to them directly to learn what it's like. And we also developed an aquaculture online game that they can play to really understand and make connections between the environmental information such as water temperature, storm risk, to make the good business decision, thinking about what those things mean for the economics. And we developed the game, and then we worked with the Lewiston Elementary School again to pilot test this tool. So we're right in the middle of developing this tool, and we pilot tested this with the students, the fourth graders, last month. And I was really delighted to see that the students are really engaged playing these games, and by playing the game, they can learn the different types of investment choices that they can make, and the seedling, what it's like to buy larger spat versus smaller spat, what they need to do to maintain a healthy, productive farm, and really understand what it means to sell to customers. The idea that the different buyers of the oysters might be willing to pay different prices for the same product is a foreign concept for fourth graders. So economic education opportunities in thinking about aquaculture, and in this aquaculture as a STEM career. And of course, there's also learning opportunities for them to in terms of data, understanding data, different ways of there are different ways of data representation, and they get exposed to both environmental and economic information through data visualizations, and they get to learn how to read them and then use those information to make decisions. This is a complex system, which I think is really cool opportunities for STEM education. So finally, I wanted to touch on the climate resilient fisheries or blue economy sector. And I was part of the research that compiled a set of attributes of climate resilience. And because I'm an economist, I was assigned to understand what the scientific literature is saying in terms of the attributes that support climate resilience in blue economy sectors. And what stood out to me was this technology transfer as an important attribute of climate resilience. Technology transfer is defined as the level and capacity of individuals and communities to develop and acquire new technology and methods, as well as the ease with which these technologies and methods are transferred between and among actors in the system. These technology transfer does not happen overnight. It also requires education and learning opportunities for many people. And offshore wind energy development in the Gulf of Maine is an example that comes to my mind, that kind of thinking is ever so important, especially for those who has been traditionally and historically operating in the ocean space. As I said, this region has vast wind energy capacity. The Gulf of Maine is now, we are going through the renewable energy, offshore wind energy development process. And we are following this process set up by BOEM, which is the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management. It's part of Department of Interior. And this planning is really fast-paced and dynamic. A year ago, we didn't know where the offshore wind development can happen. And in April, they published a map asking for existing stakeholders if there's any conflict in the areas that they identified. And if you're a commercial fisherman, this is completely new. And the models and data presented to them is also very new. And then they had to quickly get up to speed to understand what's happening, why that's happening, how they need to engage. It's really stressful time. fast forward last September, that's the time that the draft wind energy area, I want to be using the right term, but I think that's the right term, was published by BOEM after them engaging with the commercial fishing sector. So it only took about half a year for that engagement and determination of the area where the offshore wind energy development might happen in the Gulf of Maine. It will take about 10 years until we see the start of construction or the operation of offshore wind energy, but the decisions are being made really quickly within a year or two. And we are right at the point here. The lease auction will take place this year. So a year ago, we didn't know anything about this. Well, some might have known, but if you're like me or commercial fishermen, offshore wind was kind of like, oh yeah, I heard about it, but it's kind of like not here yet. Now it's really here, and then they had to engage with the process really quickly. And then now this year we're gonna know who will be developing offshore wind energy in the Gulf of Maine. So the lease will be made. And so as an economist, really feeling the need to support this process, GMR is in a really good place because, well, I'm fortunate to be doing a research at the place like Gulf of Maine Research Institute because we have the community engagement team who has a relationship with the stakeholders. So they've been working with the stakeholders to really get them up to speed, sharing resources, making sure that they know when to engage, how to engage, writing, helping them write public comment letters. Those are all new things for many of the people here. And then, so we are so they've been helping with that process. And now, as I said earlier, now we have a general sense of where the offshore wind energy development might happen in the Gulf of Maine. And so the community team help with the port meetings, really engage directly with the commercial fishing stakeholders. Now they are sharing the resource so that they can continue to learn how to engage, how best for them to engage with the process on a website. So if you're curious about what's happening and how to engage and what kind of information is out there for you to make the decision, we created the offshore wind resource hub, which can be accessible with the from this QR code. And as an economist, I am convening the regional social scientists and economists. When I go to offshore wind meetings, there's usually a whole bunch of natural scientists and engineers talking about the impacts on a species or the engineering side of the stories. But when it comes to human decisions or how the socioeconomics will get impacted, social scientists and economists, we're unfortunately not always a front and center. So I'm helping to convene the researchers so that we can have meaningful discussions and then to support the project in a collaborative manner. And now we are in the process of, again, reaching back to the ocean and coastal stakeholders to think about what kind of future they want and how that can happen, or how academic communities can help them make that happen, if that makes sense. So really, the offshore wind energy is a stressful development for many people, is a stressful time. But I hope we take advantage of the situation and use this as an opportunity to do the future visioning and for the better future. So enabling blue acceleration in the era of climate change. So that's the topic that I shared with you today. But the takeaway really is that blue economy is not just sustainability, but also human well-being and equity. And climate resilience also, there's a kind of shared theme is really the sustainability and equity and well-being of the coastal or the marine or well-being of human communities. And way forward, flexibility in governance and management system is shown to be important, but also we need to also keep in mind that accountability and transparency is also important. So flexible needs to be, there's a trade-off between the flexibility and accountability and transparency. We are seeing that the stakeholders making decisions and younger generations coming in with different ideas, different preferences. And we're seeing a changing of norms, and understanding that as social scientists and economists is a really big challenge, but also very exciting. Academic and research opportunities and emerging opportunities. Again, the technology transfer just doesn't happen. And in order to ensure that equitable access to benefits derived from these new opportunities, education and learning opportunities, offering those things would become more and more important. So with that, thank you so much. And I'd be happy to take any questions.
And if anybody in the room does have a question, raise your hand and I can pass the microphone off here.
Your work seems overwhelming to me.
It is.
Is seaweed and sea kelp part of the aquaculture world? Okay. And last thing, the numbers of Maine fishermen staying pretty steady or decreasing or increasing?
So the first question about seaweed aquaculture, Maine is now seen as one hub for that aquaculture seaweed production in the US. So we're seeing more and more, well, that is really happening. And the recognition from the global audience seeing, like, for instance, in Europe, the seaweed aquaculture sector in Europe really trying to partner with Maine or coming to Maine to have, for the collaborative opportunities. And for the number of commercial fishermen in Maine, the lobster sector, thinking about lobster sector, and just saw the data earlier. The number of licenses issued has not declined, obviously, but that's really a difficult statistics to get a hold of, because the number of license issues does not always match with the number of active fishermen. So we are not. I cannot say that I'm seeing a decline or increase, but with the caveat that it's also a difficult number to nail down.
You mentioned that the Gulf of Maine is warming at a faster rate than elsewhere. What would account for that? Is it geography, and that is you have a place where seawater kind of coagulates, or is it human induced or part of that? What accounts for that?
Right. So climate change is a major driver, and that is because of the greenhouse gas emissions. But the Gulf of Maine bottom, so I'm not an oceanographer, so I really direct you to the site that I shared earlier, the Gulf of Maine Explained. The weakening of the Labrador Current and the Arctic ice sheet melt, lots of more fresh waters coming from the Arctic system. That is making it in the situation, the Gulf Stream to the warm water to come into Gulf of Maine. And the bottom of the Gulf of Maine, it's kind of like a bathtub. There is northeast channel where that water from outside of Gulf of Maine come in. But I was at so I saw the map that I believe that's the mechanism of the warming. So the warmer Gulf Stream coming through Gulf of Maine more easily than before. but please do consult with the oceanographer.
Okay, I have an easy question. I saw the word blue in a lot of your screens. I must have missed what blue means.
Blue
Yeah,
blue economy. Blue is the ocean. So green economy was the concept that emerged first, and that was environmentally sustainable economic growth. Now, with the increase in the ocean resource use, it used to be just commercial fisheries, wild harvest fisheries, but now aquaculture, marine energy development. We're seeing a lot of economic activities happening in the ocean area. Blue. So that's where the blue comes from. Yeah.
Okay, I used to live up in, down east, barely down east at Orland, Maine, in the Penobscot area. And we had a lot of elvers fishery, the very small little babies that
Yeah.
were being harvested, very expensive, so that there was a great competition between those people that had quotas allowed to them. And it always troubled me why we were sending them off to Asia or other areas to be raised into eels. I know when I've traveled in Europe that eels are a delicacy. And I don't understand why that's not another way we could have developed. I think they can be raised in traps, almost like you raise other kinds of shellfish. They're not shellfish, of course, but do you have any understanding about that market?
Little bit. So the good news is that now there is a company doing the aquaculture grow out of elvers. So this Maine-based company doing aquaculture eel production. It's American Unagi, I believe is the company name. And I don't know the exact location of where they are located. But so the reason why I think in the past, the reason for why Maine elvers were exported to Asia was because Asia had the, really well-established eel aquaculture production technology. Aquaculture production is not always successful as a business because of a lot of uncertainty in technology, especially if they're dealing with newer species. So I believe that was the reason. But now there is a company based here that is doing a grow out of eel. So there, the situation, that I think is a great opportunity for May.
I think we've got time for one more question here.
Thank you very much for your work and your presentation here today. We're very accustomed here in Maine to realizing that we have declining stocks of lobster and cod and other species. I wonder if the aquaculture industry is also affected by rising ocean temperature or changing ocean chemistry.
It will yes, they are getting impacted. And then there are multiple ways that the warming waters can impact the aquaculture production. One thing is the harmful algal blooms. So biotoxins that we're seeing newer species in the region. And also that's a huge concern. Another thing is, of course, the acidification, especially thinking about oysters or shellfish. And what was I gonna say? Oh, the disease, right? Like the disease. And so I think really the as the industry grows, better monitoring, better detection technologies really can support, mitigate some of those climate risks in aquaculture sector. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone, for another successful Great Falls Forum. We look forward to seeing you next time.